This is Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show with Jenn Vogel, a top-rated live stream and podcast in the market research and insights industry. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen on all major podcast channels. Join Jenn and her guests for a weekly discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Real Talk is presented to you by VoxPopMe, the leader in video research and ranked number 1 in qualitative research by Grit 2 years running. Here's today's conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand their customers better. I'm Jenn Vogel, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about how to influence customers. So to discuss that topic, I'm joined by Emmanuel Probst, Senior Vice President of Brand Health Tracking at Ipsos. Welcome to the show, Emmanuel.
Jenn, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the team at VoxPopMe for hosting. Really appreciate this.
Absolutely. Excited to have this conversation today. To kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the insights industry?
Sure. Well, I'm Emmanuel Probst. I'm based in Los Angeles. And as you mentioned, I'm with Ipsos, which is probably the largest market research firm in the world today. And at Ipsos, I'm global lead for brand thought leadership, and I'm also a SVP for brand tracking. What this means is I help our clients measuring brand performance and equity, and we also help with activation. Further, I teach consumer market research at UCLA, and I write as well for various publications, and I wrote Brand Hacks, the book that is behind me, and that is available on Amazon today. And I'm working on a next book for this year as well.
Oh, that's exciting. What's the new book about? If you can give us a teaser.
Yeah, the teaser is there is a lot as marketers and as market research professionals. There is a lot we can learn from non-marketers. What can we learn from DJ Khaled? What can we learn from Pharrell Williams? What can we learn from magicians, firefighters, art thieves? And take a fresh look at how to foster brand growth and customer loyalty from there. So that's the teaser for the next book.
Oh, that sounds actually really, really interesting. I think there's a lot of cross-functional relevance to that sort of thing. So I'll be excited to pick that up. And I'm curious, what's your experience teaching at the college level consumer insights? How long have you been doing that for?
6 years almost. Let me think. It will be 6 years in May. So time flies. And look, what's valuable here is the interaction with the students. And it's what can I learn from them and how they are attuned to culture. Very important to me. So it's a sanity check. It's a good space to test some new ideas, to understand how these ideas resonate. And also, or mostly, it's about the interaction with the students. And again, immerse in their world. So in that regard, it's very beneficial from a social and cultural standpoint, if you will.
Yeah, I bet. And it's really probably an interesting opportunity to kind of stay on top of the latest, right? When you have to actually be teaching it to the new generation of researchers or marketers or whoever they may become. You really have to stay up on the latest and greatest in the industry.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to our topic for today, influencing customers, what do you mean by influence, and how does that play out in, I guess, a perfect scenario?
Yeah, many people define themselves as influencers, and in my opinion, wrongly so. I think that you have a message, something interesting to say, some knowledge to share, and from there, you are de facto an influencer. Too many people tend to go the other way around, whereby they say, "Oh, I want to be an influencer and I want to influence. Okay, what am I going to tell my audience next?" So if you will, it's more of a bottom-up approach than a top-down approach. What I mean by this is influencer is a quality, if you will, more so than a job title. I think that's the start, is what is my message? How do I want to inspire my audience? And from there, gain influence. And I think this reasoning, this definition applies. It doesn't matter if you're an independent opinion former, key opinion former in your community. You can be an influencer at your local soccer club. That's totally fine. And in fact, that's very valuable. Or if you're a medium-sized brand, or if you're a very large brand, this definition remains true, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting. Like, you can't just decide I want to be an influencer and then figure out what you want to talk about. Like, you've got to have something interesting to talk about first. I guess from a brand perspective, how do you know if I'm a marketer at a brand, how do I know if we're influencing because we've got something really interesting to say, or if we're trying pretty hard to figure out what to influence?
Yeah. Here again, I think we can link this trend to brand purpose, for example. I think too many brands are trying too hard to jump on that brand purpose bandwagon. And some brands are built around purpose. You think about Patagonia. Some brands can adopt a purpose, and some brands should just stay away from it. And I feel it's the same thing with influence and with content. So how does your brand benefit the community? And what is your brand truly invested in? And when I say truly invested in, I'm not just talking about your mission statement. What is your social mission? How do you benefit your users as well, the individuals, the social environment, and the cultural environment? And from there, if you have something interesting to say, here again, de facto, you become an influencer because you educate consumers and you educate your audience on the market and what to do with the product. So two things come to mind. Number one, you have to stay true to yourself. And what has changed over the last 2 years is consumers expect brands to demonstrate what they stand for. And what I mean by this is, if you decide to become an influential brand, well, that means you have something to say, but also that you're willing to do it. And the second thing, which is good news, I think, is we're moving towards education. And what I mean by this is, people don't need more brands. People don't need more advertising. People need to feel more confident in the choices they are making. As such, people rely on brands to educate them about, again, the market, the products, their needs, how to go about something. And I feel there's a role for brands to play in content creation, in thought leadership, and de facto as influencers by educating people. And what I mean by educating is sharing information that is useful, insightful, valuable to the audience, beyond, of course, products, features, and benefits.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's that topic sort of came up on another episode of this show a week or two ago when we were talking to Joe from Avon, who, about educating their customers about different ingredients and the benefits of certain types of products. And like you said, how do I feel confident in my purchase decisions? Because I know what the benefits of this product is versus that. And I think consumers, you're right, they are looking to brands to be the ones to give them that information and be that, I guess, authority, which kind of leads me to my next question for you is, as brands are influencing the marketplace, some are doing that through that authority as, I'm the thought leader, or I'm the one that's, I've got the information that is valuable to you, that's going to benefit you. And others do that through intimacy. So could you talk a little bit about what each of those mean to you and how brands are doing that?
Yeah. broadcasting a message versus intimacy, these two are not mutually exclusive. There are benefits to both. Here's what comes to mind. Intimacy is going to be so important moving forward, whereby we want to foster really a one-on-one relationship with customers. How do we do this? We do this with first-party data. So as I said about 5 minutes ago, is people tend to reject advertising and overwhelming media presence, if you will. The way to address this is delivering a message and a product and an experience that is relevant to the individual. And that's where you leverage first-party data. You spoke about Avon, I think, not being intimately familiar with Avon. That's a good example where you're going to be able to suggest some product recommendations, for example, based on past purchase, based on skin type, based on hair color, based on ethnic background, all the attributes that are relevant in beauty. As such, you enter an intimate relationship with your customers because you know a lot about them. And you monetize this in a smart way by recommending products and content that is relevant to this individual in particular. To me, that is intimacy, and that is feasible at scale thanks to first-party data and thanks to big data and data analytics. We can speak more about this if you want. And then you also spoke about being the authority, and you can do this at brand level with more of an overarching message that reaches a broader audience and decide to become the authority in organizing the world's data, for example. That's what Google does. So this is a message that permeates throughout their products and services. So you really can do both. And in fact, as I'm thinking through this, Jenn, I think you should do both. You should have that overarching message whereby you're the authority in your field and a more personal, intimate message and relationship with your consumers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it really, it's similar to when you think about like any sort of marketing funnel. How do you communicate with people at different stages, different types of customers versus prospects versus, based on their awareness level, that more like broad-based messaging that speaks to your authority is going to be that higher top of funnel message, right? Whereas as people move through the funnel and have more of a relationship, you can be more relevant because you do have more data on them or, more of that ongoing relationship. And I do want to talk more about the big data thing because this is such a challenge. I mean, an opportunity, of course, because as you say, we have all this information about consumers, about our own customers that we can leverage to, create intimate relationships and make relevant recommendations or deliver relevant content. But managing all of that big data and making sense of it is a big challenge for researchers today. Like how have you found that to be?
Yeah, there's that saying, marketers are data rich, but insights poor. So it's compelling to collect all that data, but then what do you do with it? Also, and I think that was a promise from programmatic advertising, which became a goal that we cannot attain. You can personalize the relationship. You cannot necessarily always personalize the advertising. And what I mean by this is, as a brand, you should have one overarching message, and then you could have a dozen or 2 dozens creative executions. You're not going to create ads for each and every consumer you're going after. So that's not intimacy, that's advertising. The way you do it is, in my opinion, to be very, very pragmatic, is you have an overarching message for your brand. What do you stand for? You then demonstrate this message throughout your products and services. In advertising, you convey this overarching message across a small range of creative executions. Next, at user level, you foster this intimate relationship we spoke about. That's where you leverage first-party data. And again, I think beauty is a good example to make those personalized recommendations. And that's how you cross-sell and upsell other products in a fashion that is relevant and valuable to people. So hopefully I was concise enough, but I think that's really the way to go from this big idea, this overarching message, all the way to what is relevant and intimate to people.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's really that was a great response. And we're not looking for you to be concise here. We're live on the internet. We're doing an interview, so you don't have to be concise. It's fine. um what was I going to say about that? What industries, like I feel like this might be more difficult depending on your, the channel in which you sell your products or offer your services, right? Like, do you think it's easier for brands that sell direct to a consumer versus, say, like a CPG brand who's selling through, retail channels and grocery stores and things like that?
I think that's a very important and very interesting question. Here's my take on it. So, direct to consumer brands, what they have going on for them is they're built on technology and a culture of data science. As such, they do such a great job at analyzing and monetizing that first party data we spoke about. And they do such a great job at fostering this intimate relationship with people. Conversely, they lack the reach and the exposure of the big CPG brands. So my take is the small DTC brands need the traditional players for reach and creating mental availability. Conversely, the CPG brands have a lot to learn from those smaller DTC brands. So we can take an example in shaving, for example. What comes to mind is Dollar Shave Club and Harris versus Gillette. So Gillette's been the leader in shaving for how many years now? The truth is, when I buy blades at Costco, Gillette knows nothing about me. They know nothing about my skin type. They know nothing about how often I shave. They know nothing about my pre-shave and after-shave routine and exfoliating routine, if any. In contrast, Dollar Shave Club and Harris selling directly to me, they're going to understand how often I need blades, and they can ask me questions, but they can also analyze their basket data to understand what products I buy with what combination, and from there upsell me on products for sensitive skin or a exfoliating mask, as an example. So here, what I'm trying to exemplify is Gillette, lots of volume, lots of advertising, lots of reach, yet little to no relationship with consumers or customers, I should say. In contrast, Harris Dollar Shave Clubs are much smaller DTC brands. They know a lot about me. They can cross-sell and upsell. They like the exposure that they would receive from Costco. Net, that's how, and that's why you see so many DTC brands moving into Costco, moving into Target, because they understand that if they want to expand their reach, if they want to appeal to a broader audience, well, at the end of the day, they need those traditional players. It's a bit like advertising. For years, we heard offline is dead, everything's moving online, digital advertising is the next best thing. It is, with the limitation that broadcast media, offline media, reaches such a large audience. The point being that digital advertising is growing, and not surprisingly so, yet spend on Super Bowl ads this weekend were some of the highest they've ever been, because brands know that to achieve reach, you need broadcast media. So to get back on point with DTC versus CPG brands, hopefully this illustrates how CPG brands can learn from Dollar Shave Club and Harris in terms of collecting, analyzing, and monetizing first-party data. In turn, Harris and Dollar Shave Club need the likes of Costco and Target to achieve reach and develop a more sustainable business.
Yeah, that's such an interesting distinction, and kind of goes along with some of what you were talking about with intimacy versus authority. Like the larger the audience that you've got and the larger reach, the less intimate maybe you are with the individual end user, right? And vice versa. So that's really interesting. And we could get into Super Bowl advertising from this weekend, which was just like a fascinating display in my opinion, but I don't know if we have that much time. We'll see if we have time at the end and we can talk about our favorite ads.
Mm.
But with that said, we're going to take a really short break and do our weekly segment with Vox Pop Me's VP of Research, Brian Monsheen. This week, he shares tips on how to ace the elevator speech.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Bright Ideas. Today, we are going to talk about acing that elevator speech. So we've all been in that situation at some time in our careers where we're cornered by our boss or a company executive, and they ask what is seemingly a very simple question. Hey, how's that project going? Any updates? Then your heart starts to beat a little faster, and you're now on the clock. So you have a very limited amount of time to take a project that could have been weeks of setup, research, analysis, and summarize that down into roughly 30 seconds. And that's our elevator speech. So if you're not familiar with the term, it's essentially the speech that you would give if you were in an elevator and you had just enough time to summarize something within roughly 30 seconds, which really isn't a lot of time. I've personally been in this situation a number of times in my career. And over the years, I've learned some tricks that I'd like to share with you to help prepare for these. And it really changes what could be an uncomfortable situation to probably more of a win of the week for you. So you've probably heard there's an art and science to insights. And I really see this as the art of storytelling. You can do all the work on setting up a project, putting it through field, doing the analysis, but that doesn't really mean that much if you can't properly communicate the learning. So I think the best way to structure your elevator speech is to think of it as breaking it down like a story. So if you think of a story, it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is really about why are we here? So the problem that you're solving for. This could also be the objective of the project that you've kicked off within your project brief. Then there's the middle. Okay, what did we do? So these are the details of the projects and all the key findings. And then finally, the end. This is the solution. Why does this matter? Think of this in terms of problem solution. I talked a little bit about it the last time on the concept writing exercise. These are the decisions that are going to be made and the actions you're going to take. And this is most likely the most important piece of information that the audience that you're talking to is going to want to hear. So the way I like to do this is think of it as headlines. So headlines are part of the story. So start with the list of facts and then build the story around it. Keep it short and to the point. Eliminate all those extra words. I like that Mark Twain quote where he says, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. So yeah, it's a little harder to take this down to 30 seconds, but you're going to definitely, it's going to pay off in the end. And what does that mean? Not everything's going to make the cut. So that's okay. All that secondary information, while you think it may be important to say within this elevator speech, save that for your presentation. You could always have more time to discuss that. And then keep them engaged. So you've got this person for 30 seconds. Don't bury the lead. If there's a really critical piece of information, make sure you get that out early on. And then again, try to avoid the research jargon. So a good rule that I like to follow is write it like you would say it. So just avoid that technical speak and you'll be good. And then finally, practice. So what I like to do is when I'm crafting an analysis, I'm already thinking through what that elevator speech could be. So it could just be part of your analysis phase when you're doing a project. Just make it a regular thing. You may find that you have 3 or 4 different elevator speeches that you're preparing for multiple projects that you have working on. And it's very easy to do that during analysis. And if it helps, write it down on a note card, just so you have it handy that you can use to practice whenever you need to. But that's my tip for the week. Good luck with your next elevator speech, and we'll see you next time.
What a great tip. Thank you, Brian, for sharing those insights with us today. So let's get back to the conversation. let's talk a little bit more about that intimate relationship with customers. How important is it? We've talked about some of the big data that we can access, whether that's purchase or, in some of the direct to consumer brands, some of the data that they have on, routines or preferences, things like that. But how important is it to hear them, listen to them, and make changes based on their feedback?
Yeah, I think you collect as much data as you can within what is reasonable, if you will, and you analyze their feedback, whether it's formal or informal, to nurture that relationship with them, but also to inform your strategy. So let me give you an example. Using chatbots, for example, or those direct interactions with brands using text is very important. It benefits everyone. One, it benefits your customer because people expect a direct interaction and immediate seamless interaction with brands. Nobody wants to wait on hold for some remote customer service anymore. So ideally, this interaction will happen online through either chatbot or live person, but in any case will happen instantly and seamlessly. Now, from a brand perspective, you leverage all that feedback, all this data, again, to inform your relationship with this particular customer and also to inform your strategy in terms of what you should do best and what you should do better as a brand.
Yeah, for sure. And so there's there's then a bunch of different ways that you're communicating with, capturing feedback, like talking about chatbots, obviously surveying people, you're capturing behavioral data. I mean, that's a lot to pull together and make decisions on. Like how are you prioritizing, I guess, like what feedback you're getting versus all of the data that you've captured in other ways?
Yeah, well, first, I think you walk across all these channels, whereby there isn't one channel that is better than another. All channels have their strengths and limitations, and various different channels are more relevant at different stages of the interaction. So it's, in my opinion, survey plus behavioral data such as clickstream and basket abandonment plus um, analysis of first-party data that you collect through those interactions with chatbots and with live agents and so on and so forth. Once you gather all the data, you find patterns, and that's where machine learning and that's where data analytics come in. Of course, you're not going to make sense of this feedback from each and every customer in isolation. That's where you need technology and software to group the feedback in key themes and areas for development and improvements that make sense and that are actionable for your brand. So technology helps you with gathering and onboarding and analyzing the data. Then skills and knowledge and experience and expertise, that's what you need to translate these insights into taking action.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you're the brand health tracking expert over there at Ipsos. So what role does brand health tracking play in, alongside all of the customer data that you have?
Yeah, brand health tracking is evolving in a great way, in line with what we just discussed about various data channels. The traditional way of tracking brands in our market research industry was to do surveys. And again, there is a lot of value in surveys. I'm certainly not advocating against surveys. We field dozens of thousands of surveys every week at Ipsos, and rightly so. We, however, enrich this data, if you will, with social media signal, with news monitoring, with legislative activity, with first-party data, and so on and so forth. And the opportunity for brand health tracking is really to maximize the diversity of these signals, and from there to deliver a more insightful, more informed brand strategy. What I mean here is not just to report on, well, this is what your customers say about your brand versus competition. And we do this, and we should keep doing this. That's great. It's also, though, to tell them, well, this is what is happening on social media. These are the trends that we see on Instagram. These are the colors that might be important for your brand. This is the tone people expect. This is what we see in content creation, content that is educational and insightful for people. This is what happens in the legislative environment and how those legislations may impact your brand for better and for worse. As such, brand health tracking, brand guidance, and brand strategy is becoming, I believe, more insightful, more valuable, more important to clients, because it is not just a tool to look at the performance of your brand in hindsight. It is becoming a tool to predict and forecast what you're going to do next.
Yeah. I think that's such an important evolution, right? Like, not necessarily just sticking with what's happened a day ago, a week ago, a quarter ago, but really using it to plan. And I think, like, I'm going to stay here on this brand health tracking thing for a bit, because this is an area of insights that I think has taken a while to evolve. And certainly a lot of brands have had long-standing, like you mentioned, surveys. Maybe they're 45 minutes long and they run the same questions every quarter, and they've been running them that way since the year 2000 or whatever. How do you help to kind of convince these brands and customers that it is okay to evolve the method in which they're tracking, to, that there is other data that can layer on top that can help, as opposed to the kind of maybe more traditional way of doing tracking?
Yeah. First off, I think that no one should run 45-minute surveys anymore. I know this exists. For the life of me, I cannot think of anyone who will be patient enough to go through a 45-minute survey on personal care or beauty or what have you, or life insurance, who knows. And how do you convince people? I think you pilot and you experiment. Put it this way. Again, I insist that surveys and traditional tracking tools are very valuable, so we don't transition people off those tools. In contrast, we bring another layer. So let's bring a layer of social media data. Let's bring a layer of news monitoring. Let's connect with first-party data, and so on and so forth. But you don't have to do this all at once, if that makes sense. You can experiment, see what's insightful and what not, at what stage of your life cycle your brand is at. That is also something that's important. Not all tools are suitable to all brands. It really depends. Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to become a stronger market leader? Are you trying to expand your reach to new audiences? And so on and so forth. Based on what you're trying to achieve, you might not want to dance on TikTok, if I may use the expression, right? So, short answer one, a staggered approach whereby you certainly do not trash everything you've been doing so far. However, you add on to it. And number two, you experiment and find out what's most relevant to your brand and your strategy.
Yeah, that's a good approach for sure. So you're not losing anything, just slowly adding on. What about subtracting? What would you say to a brand who is currently running a 45-minute survey every quarter? Where should they start with, baby steps of what to remove to get it to a more reasonable and useful state?
Yeah, in my experience, a non-confrontational way to have this conversation is, don't start with the survey. There is no need to make people feel bad about their survey and say, well, this is too long. It's take a big step back. Who is using the data? What do these metrics inform who in your organization, how many people in your organization rely on this data? What do they rely on this data for? What does this data inform? Nurturing KPIs or making you look good to your boss, or inform new product development or market understanding, and so on and so forth. But the point I'm making is, in my experience, when you look at a very long survey, there is no way everyone in the organization leverages everything that's in that survey. So simply put, it's easy to cut down on what people don't use and what people don't really need. If you will, it's a little bit like going through your clothes closet. There are a lot of things you'd like to keep because you're attached to those items for whatever reasons. No, I mean, I'm like this too, yeah. But if you take a pause and you reflect on how often you wear those items and how badly you need them, you really find out that you can get rid of a lot of stuff without suffering from any downsides.
Yeah. So basically, everybody should be Marie Kondoing their surveys. Which questions bring you joy? What are you actually making decisions on? I love it. I think it's a great comparison with the clothes in your closet.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
There you go. And so, what's the importance of understanding then the market as a whole? We've talked about customer data, we've talked about brand health. Like, how about understanding the market as a whole?
I think what's changing here is consumers no longer move through that traditional funnel of going from awareness for whatever they might need all the way to purchase and recommendation. So we have a lot of work and a lot more work to do at the top of the funnel in understanding. Of course, we want to understand what people have in mind, what is meaningful to them, what they might need. We also want to understand the competitive environment, and we want to understand content in both a qualitative and a quantitative fashion, because people walk into a category with expectations of their own, but expectations that are shaped by the category itself, by other brands, by culture, by society, and by their needs. What I mean by this is, if you need new running shoes, it's highly unlikely that you wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I might consider new running shoes. From there, what is in my competitive consideration set? From there, which ones am I going to select? I really don't think it works that way. You think that you want to purchase new running shoes, you have pre-existing knowledge and pre-existing product understanding from Nike, from Adidas, from New Balance, and so on and so forth. So at the top of the funnel, the opportunity is to understand the personal goals of consumers from an identity standpoint, the psychographics, which I think are crucial, also the culture consumers live in, and just as importantly, the competitive environment and how your brand and other brands likely have shaped consumers' expectations.
Yeah, I'm trying to I'm putting myself into the consumer shoes, because turns out I'm a consumer sometimes too. But you're right. I mean, nobody's waking up going, oh, this is a product I'm considering purchasing. What are all my options? Have I done a thorough evaluation of all of the different competitors and price comparisons? Like, people, so much of it is subconscious, right? And based on, like you said, experience and other influences. So important to understand the market that you're in, especially, I mean, you use the example of running shoes, like seeing so many new running shoe brands emerge into such a, that's a bold, a bold attempt to try to get into that space where you've got Nike and Reebok and New Balance who really own that space, but there are brands that are emerging and making a big impact. So, they're clearly understanding the gap that exists in that space and understanding the market in a way that maybe others aren't, and finding a way to slot themselves in, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and to that end, I feel that's where, again, all data sets are valuable, and particularly qualitative data. And that's where, again, I'm thankful to VoxPopMe for hosting this talk today. And if I may plug VoxPopMe in, is that's where such technology is important, because qualitative is a very valuable way to capture everything we talked about, what mindset you're in, what is the cultural relevance of those products and brands you're choosing, and why do you do what you do.
Yeah, it's so important. And thank you for that little plug. I did not pay him to say that, everyone. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your insights and your expertise. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thanks, Jen. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate our audience listening today. It was fantastic to connect.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening and joining us today. We'll be back for another episode soon. I'll be joined by Insights Pro and legend, Jennifer Pembroke Johnson. See you then.